Nice.
He really loves that font.
You get some lights off on there. Thanks. I really want that to accentuate that font. All right, so today's talk is going to be on God's point of view and assumptions. Assuming. I want to start with a fun little story that I found online that I thought it was a nice way to start. This is a story about someone who was laying carpet, and he does it professionally. So here we go. A professional carpet layer stepped back to survey a newly installed carpet. Reaching into his shirt pocket for a cigarette, he realized the pack was missing. At the same time, he noticed a lump under the carpet in the middle of the room, about the size of the missing cigarette packet. There was no way to retrieve his cigarette pack from under the attached carpet without ripping everything up and starting over. Finally, he decided to beat the object flat, thereby destroying any evidence of the mistake. So he's like, gotta squish it, spread it out so the owner doesn't see it. Gathering his tools, the carpet layer walked out to his truck. There on the seat of his truck was the mislaid pack of cigarettes. As he lit one up, the homeowner hurried out of that house and asked, "Have you seen my son's gerbil?" You guys got that? Gerbil was under the rug. Yeah. Squished it in the. Yeah. So, what do you think about when you hear assumptions? You know the saying, when you assume, you make mistakes. Right? But not all assumptions are bad. But before we get into that, I want to read some of Father's words. All right, this is a little hard to read, so I'll read it. If you can love one person, God's love will be there in proportion to the depth and size of that love. If you can love many people like this, God's love will come in proportion to the greatness of that love, to the depth of that love. Good people must be able to win others, not in such a way as to conquer them, but to love them, and to bring them into greater harmony and unity. Unity is the first thing you should desire. And if you love anyone at all, you should want to love him with your whole heart, even at the cost of your life. Then you can overcome hell. If you are not united, if there is disharmony, hell is there in your mind. So that quote is very powerful, especially when it comes to things like assuming. We assume the worst in people, or we assume things that aren't correct. Assuming things can lead to a lot of division. But as I was saying earlier, assuming is not necessarily or inherently evil or wrong. We assume things on a daily basis, right? You assume it's going to rain today because it looks like it's going to rain today. You assume the theater seat works because you've been sitting in that theater for a long time and you don't expect it's going to break on you. So there's some things that we assume, and correctly so. We do it all day, every day. It's part of our habits. It's part of our routine to assume things. But nonetheless, assumptions can also be dangerous. There are times when we should not assume, like when our physical well-being is at stake, or when our emotional well-being is at stake. Like, I assumed he was a competent driver, so I didn't wear a seatbelt. I assumed I knew enough, so I didn't really study for the test. These kind of things can really backfire, and we know, the negative consequences to making these kind of assumptions based on hopings for things and thinking, making ourselves believe that things will be better than they could potentially be.
So I like to think that some dangerous words to even just say, after or when you're in the middle of that emotional turmoil or whatever is, well, I just assumed, or I didn't prepare, or I didn't check, I just assumed. Because assumption creates this illusion in your mind when in reality, you just don't know what's going on. But because out of fear of some kind of internal struggle, we allow that to overcome. And that actually happened when we were just trying to figure out what to prepare for the sermon today. The idea of assuming came about because I was freaking out on Saturday. I usually work during the week as an editor, but then, I still felt that broadcast itch, so I got a weekend job at NBC Boston, and it's been a while since I was at a station, and it was a lot of new things to learn, and I was already there since August, and I wasn't picking up on anything, and I was at the point where I'm like, I can't do this job anymore. I don't think I could do it. I can't do it. I can't show up. And Danica just kept asking me importance of sharing with your spouse, or sharing in general, to help you rationalize your thoughts. He's like, well, did they say that you're doing a terrible job? I'm like, well, no, but you never know. You never know. I feel like I'm doing a bad job, and they keep helping me, and I think it's a bad thing. I need to feel independent and do things on my own, and I think I'm not good for this. And he's like, why don't you talk to your manager and explain what you're feeling? And I was just like, the first thing in my head was why would you talk to your manager about how much you suck? Like, I feel that's the worst thing you want to do. But he clearly saw that it was affecting me. I had to accept the fact that it was really affecting me to the point where I wasn't even sure if I was ready to show up, period, on Saturday. And so I decided to just talk to him, to my manager, and I was very, very honest to just explain to him about, like, I've been here for a while. I expected I would be perfect at this by now, and I'm not. And so if you are assuming why it's taking so long for me to post even a multimedia piece, it's because I don't know what the heck I'm doing still. I'm still trying to learn. And then he was amazing because he kind of just calmed me down. He clearly saw I was freaking out, and he's like, Tamara, this is a learning curve. You just started. Don't worry. You're okay. From what I heard from everyone else, you're doing a good job. Now, if I didn't talk to my manager, I would have just quit. I would have just assumed I was doing a terrible job. I would have just quit, and that would have been the end of that. But I'm grateful that I did listen to Dan and talked with him, because even it kind of made the day better too. And I kind of had patience with myself because in a sense, I assumed, I didn't have enough faith in myself as my manager had faith in me. That's a subject for a different sermon. But so taking the dangers of assumption even farther, when we assume things, we also have the potential to grow hatred in the heart because we just assumed. If there is a certain situation involving a person and we don't understand their behaviors, but instead of talking with them, finding out like, hey, is everything okay? You didn't seem like you participated enough, or I felt like something was off. Maybe, they're going through some big issue. But instead, we probably will stay silent and like, oh, I can't believe that person's slacking or whatever. They're not investing enough. They're not doing enough. And then you almost start creating your own concepts against this person. You're just assuming without even talking to them and without trying to understand where they're coming from, where those actions could be coming from. And so, oh, thank you. So there are three types of assumptions. There's the assumption born out of apprehension, how I thought I was going to get fired, like in my example. Born out of apathy, how you don't, but in the effort to research something or figure someone else has it taken care of. I think as couples, we do that all the time. We tend to talk about, like let's say a bill needs to get paid. We talk about how it needs to get paid. yep, it's very important to get paid. Then we get that late payment notice, like, I thought you were supposed to do it. We talked about it. It's like, no, but I thought you were going to take care of it. We just assumed that the other was going to take care of it instead of, being more clear. Or born out of arrogance. I figure everyone should know that, looking down on people and viewing them as lost or ignorant. You're just like, oh, whatever, for their behavior, they're just lost, or they should know better. Yeah.
So, yes, like we were saying that we can even grow hatred in the heart. So there's these three different kinds of assumption. These are not the textbook identifiers of what, make up assumption. These are three guiding points that could make up assumption. Just to help clarify and to help bring, some points you can focus on here during the talk. So apprehension or anxiety can lead to you making assumptions about something in the future, whether it's you're freaking out about what's going to potentially happen because you assume the worst. Apathy, where you just don't care, and you're like, I should check, but it'll be okay, right? These kind of assumptions. And then arrogance, where you just feel like you know better and that people just are a little ignorant. Does anyone have any experiences with with any of these three that they would like to share or could share? Just an example. I mean, everyone goes through assumptions on a daily, and we realize the faults of our assumptions on the daily. So did anyone have any assumptions that they would like to share about? We just shared a bunch, and it just took us like a minute. Anybody? No, you guys are all pretty good without assuming. Oh, in the back.
My wife and I, when we have conversations, usually we have disagreement, and at the end of the conversation, I ask her to define what she means when she says certain words, and I define what I mean when I say certain words, and we find out that our definitions are completely different. So it's like when she says, for example, we're nerds, so we talk about books. When she says fantasy, she means something completely different. For example.
Right, nice. Yoshi, do you have one?
Yeah, I feel like, when I'm talking to my clients when I'm doing freelance design projects, there's a lot of assumptions, and it can happen in both ways. When they want deliverables in the final product of the design, and it really depends on each client, so I have to be super careful to not make any assumptions.
Right.
And not assume that they will deliver the necessary materials for me to make the design. It's tricky because everyone's different and everyone makes an assumption. So I had to do a couple of
Yeah, that's crazy, especially when it gets involved with like your financial stability and the assumptions. You're like,
It's big for him.
okay. I didn't know it was going there. But yes, assumptions are very critical, and they can be even dangerous. To bring back a point, when Jesus was in the Bible, what was he doing? He was confronting people's assumptions of how God felt about his children. He was confronting Pharisees and Sadducees and taking them to task with their understandings of how and who God was. And it really, we know what happened with that story. Things can be very tough when you run on assumptions. And these Pharisees and Sadducees believed that they knew who Jesus was. They assumed who he was and who he really was and how he was not a prophet, but some person who was meant to tear down the establishment and to threaten all the security that they had established. I mean, assumptions can really go to a very dangerous and dark place, as history can show that time and time again. I'm not saying that you assuming there will be coffee at your work is going to tear down the fabric of time and space, but there's a reason to not assume as much and to really pay closer attention. So for me, to go off on a little, well, not a tangent. For me, I am now a behavioral sciences major. I am pursuing that field of some type of therapy
Behavioral therapist.
Behavioral therapist, yes. A behavior analyst. And one of the first things we're taught, as our field is actually a science, even if it's just studying of behaviors and actions that are consequences of those thoughts, is that we are taught one of the key constructs that guides our idea in our field is the idea of philosophic doubt. And this actually pervades all of science. It's the idea that you are supposed to constantly inquire and question about what you know to be true. You don't just accept it because it's been tested one time. So the idea of doing experiments and running further tests and checking something 30 times in different settings is essential to making sure that something is truly true. Likewise, we should never just be settled with what we assume to be correct, even if it comes to our spiritual lives, and even if it comes to our own understanding of God. You can't just assume your understanding of God is solid and as advanced as it can be. We should always be trying to grow our understanding of God and what it is to really see from his point of view. We cannot assume that God loves people who do A, B, and C, or God loves these type of actions, God hates these type of actions, how God would feel in this situation. It's very impractical for us to try and think like that, or for us to make these false assumptions of what God must be thinking. It is our point that we need to make effort to see from God's point of view, and we cannot say with absolute security and positivity that we know God's point of view. We can only probably catch glimpses of it here and there when we're making efforts and really being earnest and sincere in our efforts. So I want to take it back to discussing these 3 points from a more providential historical perspective, as we would call it. In terms of being born out of apprehension, I want to show you that each of these are actually based in some of our fallen natures, in some of the origins of the evil in this world. Now, for some of those who are new to our movement and our faith tradition, we believe that great evil came as a result of what happened at the beginning of human history with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. If you are more curious about that, we can go into that later, but I'm just going to posit that right now. But our apprehension can sometimes cause us, and we're going to get to, back to connecting to the Garden of Eden. But before I go into that, I want to just say that our apprehension, again, can cause us to make things that are, predicting the worst or seeing things not as they are, but as they would appear to be, maybe even from a selfish perspective or from a negative perspective. So when we view something with anxiety, or anxiety is controlling our vision and causing assumptions, it can be very dangerous. In the fall, in the Garden of Eden, Lucifer had a fear. And his fear was of not being loved, not being happy. When Adam and Eve arrived on the scene, God intended the world for them. He created everything for them so that they could find true happiness. And prior to that, the archangel Lucifer was there, and he was solely receiving all of the direct attention from God before Adam and Eve were there. Afterwards, Lucifer would have felt compelled and would have noticed some difference in the love he was receiving, because now there are these new children who are receiving all this love. And so as we view it, he felt anxiety. He felt and assumed that he was not going to be receiving as much love, and that he was going to be challenged in his ability to be happy. And so he actually acted on his assumptions and did selfish things. Now, how had he known, and had he actually overcome his anxiety and taken the time to get through these 3 things, to reverse these 3 kind of actions, he would have come to realize that he had nothing to really be anxious of, that as Adam and Eve matured, they would have come to love him and to bring him happiness and to work together with Lucifer to make a great space. But it was his anxiety, his assumptions, that caused him to do things prematurely and to make bad decisions that ultimately affected the history of the world and made things much more negative and based on fear and anxiety. Likewise, apathy and arrogance only heightened Lucifer's resolve. He didn't make the effort to research further, to find out, what was going to be the ultimate goal of this, creation of Adam and Eve. Would he find the happiness? He didn't. I don't expect he asked the questions, otherwise God would have given him the correct answers. And he believed himself smart enough, so he was also arrogant in thinking that he knew what was going to happen to him if Adam and Eve were here. So he was also arrogant in his beliefs and his understanding, and he was not able to see from God's perspective, and thus made a lot of terrible assumptions based on these three things all at once: his apprehension, his arrogance, and his apathy, like he just didn't put in the effort. So we need to reverse and get over our assumptions. These assumptions are closely related with a lot of our behaviors. They're not just assumptions, they're just ways of living. They are our behaviors, but when we call it assumptions, it's much more clear because we can always see when our assumption will lead to something negative. And I always give the example for me, because I have a terrible assumption of hoping and believing that traffic will be great. And I assume that I am in the right because I leave at least 15 minutes early, and that is my assumption. But then, when something bad happens, my whole world is rocked because I had convinced myself that my assumption was valid and that it was the truth. What was that line you said, Tamara, earlier? That was a great one, right? That was, what is that? Assumptions create illusions of certainty, when in reality, you don't know what's going on. So when we make assumptions, we make this positive thing in our mind that we're like, yes, we know what's up. We know what's right. We know what's going to happen. So when it doesn't happen, your world gets rocked. Not only are you making these things based on your assumptions, but once the reality of your assumption becomes clear, all these feelings come back and hit you in the face. But they come back as like, you're so resentful, you're so upset, it ruins your day. And it's all because you made an assumption. Nothing bad happened, you just hung your hat on an assumption that was supposed to be true. So for us, the things we need to be doing on a daily, we need to make effort to find out the truth. We cannot just be apathetic. We cannot just accept that life is fine, life is okay, because we're not making the effort to ask, is it okay? You can't just assume that your friends are all right because they're not saying they're not all right. You can't just assume your spouse is okay because she knows you love her. You can't just assume she loves you because you're not saying you love her. Oh, we're married, so obviously she knows I love her because we're in this relationship. Otherwise, we'd be divorced. So she knows I love her, obviously. So we need to make effort. You need to get over this apathy that we feel and go beyond our assumption that things are okay. We cannot assume things are okay ever. Next, we have to be humble. This is in regards to arrogance. I personally was susceptible to this. When I grew up in our faith tradition, I had a lot of assumptions of who people were. I felt like I knew something that was right, and I had been provided with some clear guidelines for my own life and where I needed to go. I know it's right, not to steal. I know it's right not to, minimize women based on their physical appearance. When I was in classrooms, when I was like, this is in high school, there were all these guys who were like, oh man, did you see her? And I was really, an isolationist. I didn't really hang out with a lot of kids because I was like constantly judging them. But I would always like think like, that is a terrible thing to say. But I would keep it in my mind, and I'd just be like, terrible people. And I'd be like, I don't even want to be in school. All these people, you find, you have good conversations, but then they get back to it, and then they're just like terrible people. You just can't, maybe someday when they get the truth, and maybe when they grow up, they'll understand how things work. But this arrogance was totally wrong, and it's still totally wrong. I think a lot of us, well, I can't say a lot of us. I have that, sometimes it comes back to me where I think I know what's right, and I know other people are doing something that I don't agree with, and I'm like, totally wrong. They don't get it. Their lifestyle choice is not going to bring them happiness. But then it comes back to that apathy, like, they'll figure it out. Something will take care of them. God will show them. So these are all intertwined, and they're not healthy to have. It's very important for us. Maybe you don't feel comfortable enough to reach out and to witness. Maybe you don't feel comfortable enough to share your faith because you are not really secure in your understanding of the principle itself. But you can at least make the efforts to take on the third one, to be aware of God and that he's present. And by being aware of God and his presence and understanding that you don't need to be filled with anxiety and apprehension about your existence, you can at least be friendly. You don't need to act from a place of fear and anxiety when you approach somebody. You can be genuinely happy and confident in your relationship with God, and at least you can convey that to people you know in the field. You can talk to people who you wouldn't normally talk to because you have that common base of being God's child. You don't need to view yourself as so different because you have such a different past and you share no similar beliefs in terms of lifestyle choices, but you can at least connect with them with these understandings that we are God's children and that it's good to be humble and to make effort to get to know one another. So by these things alone, we can make efforts to spread our faith and to spread who we are and who we want to be with other people. And it's important to, maybe you don't have to think on a providential level, but at least make the effort on a daily basis, and they'll come to want to know more about you and know us. It's a very natural way of living, and it's tough. These assumptions, they happen every day, but at least when you find yourself making them, and the word assumption is so common and so understood by this entire world that it's not something so obscure and abstract for us to think about. So we have a couple takeaways that we will now call on. Oh no! All right, here we go. We'll go back to that one because I want to have the 100K at the end.
So don't assume. When you assume, you make mistakes. We need to see from God's point of view and do not use your understanding of how things are to judge others and restrict access to God's love in your heart. We need to communicate, and we need to challenge apathy, arrogance, and apprehension. Question the existence of those feelings in yourself, and make effort, be humble, and be comforted by knowing God is aware and present.
Now, I also wanted to give a shout out to this awesome presenter last night that I saw a video on, who was also talking about anxiety, and he was great. He's a Christian minister, and he has an awesome take on the parables of the talents. And I did not want to totally copyright his speech, so I did not go into that. But if you want to learn more about it, he's got a great talk on Jesus and the parables and talking about assumptions. His name is Pastor Stephen Furtick. He's from the Elevation Church. You can actually find that online on YouTube. Just Stephen Furtick, and then you can type in the Elevation Church and assumptions. It was a great talk, and he gave me those 3 points in particular: the apprehension, the 3 A's he called them. Those were his specifics, and I used those. But he had a lot more that he was talking about that was separate from what we talked about. But just wanted to give him a shout out in case you're interested, and it's great what he's talking about. So, but yes, that is our talk. And again, I wanted to bring it back to our 100K because that's always important to end on this principle. Now that we've gone through and talked about what we've talked about, this passage actually takes on different meaning when you can read it. So let's read it again. If you can love one person, God's love will be there in proportion to the depth and size of that love. If you can love many people like this, God's love will come in proportion to the greatness of that love, to the depth of that love. Good people must be able to win others, not in such a way as to conquer them, but to love them, and to bring them into greater harmony and unity. Unity is the first thing you should desire, and if you love anyone at all, you should want to love him with your whole heart, even at the cost of your life. Then you can overcome hell. If you are not united, if there is disharmony, hell is there in your mind. All right, thank you. And we will offer prayer now. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Father, thank you for this opportunity to share your understanding, to share your history and our history together, to talk about things that we don't often think about, to learn about ourselves and our challenges that we make light of on a daily basis, but things that we can really be in control of. I pray that we can come to see from your point of view on a more regular basis, see and understand your heart when we are, seeing this world and seeing your children, seeing ourselves for who we are. We cannot make assumptions that we're just bad people or that we just don't understand, but that we need to make effort and that we need to make a determination to really grow ourselves and to grow who we are capable of becoming, and that we are capable of becoming someone you can really be proud of and someone that you can work through and create joy with. Father, I pray that we can learn to experience happiness with you on an everyday plane, share it with others, and really let them know that they are worthy and they can be happy and that they can be filled with your love and that you are taking care of each and every one of us. We just need to make the effort and really get beyond ourselves and our limited point of view. Father, I pray that you can work through each of us this week and we can come to embrace each other as your children and be full of effort, be humble in our understandings and our ways, and share that understanding that we have and try and be able to lift others up to see and to really connect with you. And in kind, we will also be closer to you for that. Father, thank you for this day and for this great opportunity to be here with you and our brothers and sisters. And I pray and offer this to you in my name, Dan Perry, of a blessed family. Adieu.
Adieu.